Line 528. And, as young striplings whip the top for sport on the smooth pavement of an empty court, the wooden engine flies and whirls about, admired with clamours of the beardless rout. They lash aloud, each other they provoke, and lend their little souls at every stroke. Thus fares the queen, and thus her fury blows amidst the crowd, and kindles as she goes. Nor yet content, she strains her malice more, and adds new ills to those contrived before. She flies the town, and mixing with a throng of madding matrons, bears the bride along, wandering through woods and wilds and devious ways, and with these arts the Trojan match delays. She feigned the rites of Bacchus, and to the buxom god the virgin vowed. Evoe, O Bacchus! Thus began the song, and Evoe! Answered all the female throng. O Virgin, worthy thee alone, she cried. O worthy thee alone, the crew replied. For thee she feeds her hair, she leads thy dance, and with thy winding ivy wreathes her lance. Like fury sees the rest, the progress known, all seek the mountains and forsake the town, and clouded skins of beasts the javelin bear, give to the wanton winds their flowing hair, and shrieks and shoutings rend the suffering air. The queen herself, inspired with rage divine, shook high above her head a flaming pine, then rolled her haggard eyes around the throng, and sung in Turnus' name the nuptial song. Io, ye Latian dames, if any here hold your unhappy queen Amata dear, if there be here, she said, who dare maintain my right, nor think the name of mother vain, unbind your fillets, loose your flowing hair, and orgies and nocturnal rites prepare. Amata's breast the fury thus invades, and fires with rage amid the sylvan shades. Then, when she found her venom spread so far, the royal house embroiled in civil war, raised on her dusky wings, she cleaves the skies and seeks the palace where young Turnus lies. His town, as fame reports, was built of old by Danae, pregnant with almighty gold, who fled her father's rage, and with a train of following Argives through the stormy main, driven by the southern blast, was fated here to reign. 'Twas Ardua once, now Ardea's name it bears. Once a fair city, now consumed with years. Here in his lofty palace Turnus lay, betwixt the confines of the night and day, secure in sleep. The fury laid aside her locks and limbs, and with new methods tried the foulness of the infernal form to hide. Propped on a staff, she takes a trembling mien. Her face is furrowed, and her front obscene. Deep dinted wrinkles on her cheek she draws, sunk are her eyes, and toothless are her jaws. Her hoary hair with holy fillets bound, her temples with an olive wreath are crowned. Old Calliope, who kept the sacred fane of Juno, now she seemed, and thus began, appearing in a dream, to rouse the careless man. Shall Turnus then such endless toil sustain in fighting fields and conquer towns in vain? When for a Trojan head to wear the prize, usurp thy crown, enjoy thy victories? The bride and sceptre which thy blood has bought, the king transfers, and foreign heirs are sought. Go now, deluded man, and seek again new toils, new dangers on the dusty plain. Repel the Tuscan foes, their city seize, protect the Latians in luxurious ease. This dream all-powerful Juno sends. I bear her mighty mandates, and her words you hear. Haste, arm your Ardeans, issue to the plain, with fate to friend, assault the Trojan train. Their thoughtless chiefs, their painted ships that lie in Tiber's mouth, with fire and sword destroy. The Latian king, unless he shall submit, own his old promise, and his new forget. Let him in arms and power of Turnus prove, and learn to fear whom he disdains to love. For such is heaven's command. The youthful prince with scorn replied, and made this bold defense. You tell me, mother, what I knew before. The Phrygian fleet is landed on the shore. I neither fear nor will provoke the war. My fate is Juno's most peculiar care. But time has made you dote, and vainly tell of arms imagined in your lonely cell. Go, be the temple and the gods your care. Permit to men the thought of peace and war. These haughty words Alecto's rage provoke, and frighted Turnus trembled as she spoke. Her eyes grow stiffened, and with sulphur burn. Her hideous looks and hellish form return. Her curling snakes with hissings fill the place, and open all the furies of her face. Then, darting fire from her malignant eye, she cast him backward as he strove to rise, and lingering sought to frame some new replies. High on her head she rears two twisted snakes, her chains she rattles, and her whip she shakes, and churning bloody foam thus loudly speaks. Behold whom time has made to dote, and tell of arms imagined in her lonely cell. Behold the fate's infernal minister, war, death, destruction in my hand I bear. Thus having said, her smoldering torch impressed with her full force, she plunged into his breast. Aghast he waked, and starting from his bed, cold sweat in clammy drops his limbs o'erspread. Alright, so the fury strikes. Now, Amata has been denied, and so we start this section 528 to 533. It's just like boys who are playing with a top on the floor. And you can whip it, you can look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. You can use a strap to start it and whip it. And the more it goes disorderly all around, all of these little boys start fighting each other and playing and getting really excited every time they continue to play with a top by stroking it with this whip of sorts. And it's just the same with the queen. She's like the top that spins around furiously and works everyone into excitement. So she flies around the town and she feigns the rites of Bacchus, line 542. And this would be, Bacchanalia would be this kind of frenzied celebration. And all of the stuff they're doing relates to that. So they're singing these songs. Evoi is this exclamation for Bacchus, and she's praising the young women, the virgins, and she is dancing all around. Everybody's running for the hills, literally, as part of this crazy, literally, people of their time even thought so, to some degree, this frenzied worship of Bacchus. Io, she says, which essentially means hark, hark, ye Latian dames. If you love me, then continue in this frenzy. So that's how the fury is rousing trouble and leading the palace to civil war, meaning some people aren't joining in on this and some people are. And it's all because of Amata. We also get this little detail that she whisks the bride along in 539. That would be Lavinia. So Lavinia is taken out into the woods as well. Can't marry her if you can't find her, is essentially the idea. So then the Fury Alecto goes to Ardea, where Turnus is. And she decides to do something different this time. And she disguises herself as Calliope, who is a priestess of Juno, and then appears to him in his dreams. And essentially says, are you really going to let this happen? Why don't you take up arms and reject these foreigners, these Trojans, and arm yourself so that King Latinus knows who he has disdained. And you will show everybody your greatness. You will bring fire and the sword to the Trojans to burn their ships and to kill them all. And that is heaven's command. 602 tells us that Alecto is claiming as Calliope to be sent by Juno to tell him this. And Turnus says, what do you know about war? Is his response. I'm not going to attack anybody. That's ridiculous. And you just leave the matters of peace and war to the men. Line 621 there. Well, Alecto's not happy about that response. So she quickly drops her disguises and she appears in her hideous form. She has these snakes all around her. Her eyes are malignant and she just looks terrifying and evil. Her snakes are like whips and she's shaking with bloody foam in her mouth. and she says, "Behold who I am." And she pierces his breast with her power, and he wakes up in a cold sweat, having been infected by Alecto as well. So let's see what he does from here. 642. "Arms! Arms!" he cries. "My sword and shield prepare!" He breathes defiance, blood, and mortal war. So, when with crackling flames a cauldron fries, the bubbling waters from the bottom rise. Above the brims they force their fiery way, black vapors climb aloft and cloud the day. The peace polluted thus, a chosen band he first commissions to the Latian land in threatening embassy, then raise the rest to meet in arms the intruding Trojan guest, to force the foes from the Lavinian shore, and Italy's endangered peace restore. Himself alone an equal match he boasts to fight the Phrygian and Ausonian hosts. The gods invoked, the Rutuli prepare their arms, and warn each other to the war. His beauty these, and those his blooming age, the rest his house and his own fame engage. While Turnus urges thus his enterprise, the Stygian fury to the Trojan flies, new frauds invents, and takes a steepy stand which overlooks the vale with wide command, where fair Ascanius and his youthful train with horns and hounds a hunting match ordain, and pitch their toils around the shady plain. The fury fires the pack. They snuff, they vent, and feed their hungry nostrils with the scent. 'Twas of a well-grown stag, whose antlers rise high o'er his front, his beams invade the skies. From this light cause the infernal maid prepares the country churls to mischief, hate, and wars. The stately beast the two Tiradae bred, snatched from his dam, and the tame youngling fed. Their father Tyreus did his fodder bring, Tyreus chief ranger to the Latian king. Their sister Silvia cherished with her care the little wanton, and did wreaths prepare to hang his budding horns, with ribbons tied his tender neck, and combed his silken hide, and bathed his body. Patient of command in time he grew, and growing used to hand, he waited at his master's board for food, then sought his savage kindred in the wood, where grazing all the day, at night he came to his known lodgings and his country dame. This household beast that used the woodland grounds was viewed at first by the young hero's hounds, as down the stream he swam to seek retreat in the cool waters and to quench his heat. Ascanius, young and eager of his game, soon bent his bow, uncertain in his aim. But the dire fiend the fatal arrow guides, which pierced his bowels through his panting sides. The bleeding creature issues from the floods, possessed with fear, and seeks his known abodes, his old familiar hearth and household gods. He falls. He fills the house with heavy groans, implores their pity, and his pain bemoans. Young Silvia beats her breast, and cries aloud for succor from the clownish neighborhood. The churls assemble, for the fiend who lay in the close woody covert urged their way. One with the brand yet burning from the flame, armed with a knotty club another came. Whate'er they catch or find, without their care, their fury makes an instrument of war. Tyreus, the foster father of the beast, then clenched a hatchet in his horny fist, but held his hand from the descending stroke, and left his wedge within the cloven oak, to whet their courage and their rage provoke. And now the goddess, exercised in will, who watched an hour to work her impious will, ascends the roof, and to her crooked horn, such as was then by Latian shepherds borne, adds all her breath. The rocks and woods around and mountains tremble at the infernal sound. The sacred lake of Trivia from afar, the Velan fountains and sulphureous Nar, shake at the baleful blast, the signal of the war. Young mothers wildly stare, with fear possessed, and strain their helpless infants to their breast. All right, so Turnus wakes up from the dream after the Fury stabbing him with her torch, so he immediately jumps into action. "Arms, arms, my sword and shield prepare," are the first lines, 642 of this section. And that simile at the beginning there is saying he's just like a cauldron boiling with water ready to overflow. And so all of his people catch the Fury as well, and they arm for war. Turnus considers himself an equal match, line 655. for both the Phrygians, the Trojans, and the Ausonian hosts, any Italians that side with the Trojans. So they all get ready for war for different reasons. Some for Turnus's beauty, some for his blooming age. He's just a young, charismatic leader, and some because of his fame admire him and are willing to follow Turnus. So Turnus has a few things going for him, and Virgil makes a point to include those. So meanwhile, the Fury continues her rampage of terror. She next visits the Trojans, and Ascanius and all of the people with him are hanging out in the woods, and there's this stag. We're told in 673 that this stag was raised by the Tiridae, which would be the children of Tyreus. They took him from his mother when he was young, and they have raised him ever since. And Sylvia cherished this little stag, line 677, and now it goes and hangs out with its dear kind, but at night it comes home to their lodgings. And so it's very much a pet, a very wonderful pet to these shepherd people. Well, Ascanius sees it, and launched by the Fury, the whole Trojan folk with him go after the stag, and finally Ascanius shoots the stag. Well, the stag is pierced and panting and bleeding and possessed with fear. It goes home and falls there, line 699, fills the house with all this groaning and all of these moans of pain, and young Sylvia is distraught and calls all the clownish, meaning peasant, neighbors, and the fiend Alecto urges everybody to take arms to really blow this out of proportion. And Tyreus gets on board. He grabs a hatchet. He incenses the people to grab arms and rise. So Alecto climbs the roof and blows into her horn with all her breath, so that the lake of Trivia, line 720, which would be near Cumae, near the entrance to the underworld, and all of these places, near and far, tremble because the call for war has been sounded by Alecto. Continuing on line 725. The clowns, a boisterous, rude, ungoverned crew, with furious haste to the loud summons flew. The powers of Troy, then issuing on the plain, with fresh recruits their youthful chief sustain. Not theirs a raw and unexperienced train, but a firm body of embattled men. At first, while fortune favored neither side, the fight with clubs and burning brands was tried. But now, both parties reinforced, the fields are bright with flaming swords and brazen shields. A shining harvest either host displays, and shoots against the sun with equal rays. Thus, when a black-browed gust begins to rise, white foam at first on the curled ocean fries, then roars the main, and billows mount the skies, till by the fury of the storm full blown, the muddy bottom o'er the clouds is thrown. First Almon falls, old Tyreus' eldest care, pierced with an arrow from the distant war. Fixed in his throat the flying weapon stood, and stopped his breath, and drank his vital blood. Huge heaps of slain around the body rise. Among the rest, the rich Galesus lies. A good old man, while peace he preached in vain, amidst the madness of the unruly train. 5 herds, 5 bleeding flocks his pastures filled, his lands 100 yoke of oxen tilled. Thus, while in equal scales their fortunes stood, the Fury bathed them in each other's blood. Then, having fixed the fight, exulting flies, and bears fulfilled her promise to the skies. To Juno thus she speaks. Behold, 'tis done, the blood already drawn, the war begun, the discord is complete. Now can they cease the dire debate, nor you command the peace. Now, since the Latian and the Trojan brood have tasted vengeance and the sweets of blood, speak, and my power shall add this office more. The neighboring nations of the Ausonian shore shall hear the dreadful rumor from afar of armed invasion and embrace the war. Then Juno thus, the grateful work is done, the seeds of discord sowed, the war begun. Frauds, fears, and fury have possessed the state, and fixed the causes of a lasting hate. A bloody hymen shall the alliance join betwixt the Trojan and Ausonian line. But thou with speed to night and hell repair, for not the gods nor angry Jove will bear thy lawless wandering walks in upper air. Leave what remains to me, Saturnia said. The sullen fiend her sounding wings displayed, unwilling left the light, and sought the nether shade. In midst of Italy, well known to fame, there lies a lake, Sanctus is the name, below the lofty mounts. On either side thick forests the forbidden entrance hide. Full in the centre of the sacred wood an arm rises of the Stygian flood, which, breaking from beneath, with bellowing sound, whirls the black waves and rattling stones around. Here Pluto pants for breath from out his cell, and opens wide the grinning jaws of hell. To this infernal lake the Fury flies, here hides her hated head, and frees the labouring skies. Saturnian Juno now with double care attends the fatal process of the war. The clowns returned from battle bear the slain, implore the gods, and to their king complain. The corpse of Almon and the rest are shown. Shrieks, clamours, murmurs fill the frighted town. Okay, so the Fury has done her work, and the two sides, the clowns, these peasant folk on one side, and the Trojan youth, led by Ascanius, on the other. And so they fly together. At first, it's kind of mild fighting, but then the swords come out, and the arrows are shot, and it's like a storm on the ocean that makes the waves higher and higher, until the mud and the water go flying everywhere, that it gets so intense. The first death is Almon, one of Tyreus's sons, and he's pierced from an arrow from afar, and then all these bodies start gathering around him. Galesus, this old man who had this great farm, the implication is he could have gone back to his farm, but he was taken in this tragic war. And so the battle begins. The Fury is content with her work, and she flies to Juno and says, "Haha, my job is complete," and there is blood shed on either side, and she says, "Speak the word, and I will continue to spread my fury along the Ausonian shore, 763, which would be the Italian shore." And Juno says, No, you've done enough. This marriage will be joined in blood. A bloody hymen shall the alliance join. Go ahead and go back to where I got you from, the underworld. Saturnia, meaning Juno, says. So then we get this note on where the entrance to the underworld is. Near this lake, Sanctus, there's this forbidden section in the middle of the forests near that lake, and that's where the jaws of hell open up, and so that's where the Fury flies and returns to the underworld. And so now Saturnian Juno attends the fatal process of the war. She's going to direct the war and all of the things that go along with it from now on. So now we're going to have the corpses of the clowns, the peasants, brought back to King Latinus, starting with Almon. Line 796. Ambitious Turnus in the press appears, and aggravating crimes augments their fears, proclaims his private injuries aloud, a solemn promise made and disavowed. A foreign son is sought, and a mixed mongrel brood. Then they, whose mothers, frantic with their fear, in woods and wilds the flags of Bacchus bear, and lead his dances with dishevelled hair, increase the clamour, and the war demand, such was Amata's interest in the land, against the public sanctions of the peace, against all omens of their ill success. With fates averse, the rout in arms resort, to force their monarch and insult the court. But, like a rock unmoved, a rock that braves the raging tempest and the rising waves, propped on himself he stands, his solid sides wash off the seaweeds and the sounding tides. So stood the pious prince, unmoved, and long sustained the madness of the noisy throng. But when he found that Juno's power prevailed and all the methods of cool counsel failed, he called the gods to witness their offense, disclaims the war, asserts his innocence. Hurried by fate, he cries, and borne before a furious wind, we leave the faithful shore. O more than madmen, you yourselves shall bear the guilt of blood and sacrilegious war. Thou, Turnus, shalt atone it by thy fate, and pray to heaven for peace, but pray too late. For me, my stormy voyage at an end, I to the port of death securely tend. The funeral pomp which to your kings you pay is all I want, and all you take away. He said no more, but in his walls confined, shut out the woes which he too well divined, nor with the rising storm would vainly strive, but left the helm, and let the vessel drive. A solemn custom was observed of old, which Latium held, and now the Romans hold. Their standard when in fighting fields they rear against the fierce Hyrcanians, or declare the Scythian, Indian, or Arabian war, or from the boasting Parthians would regain their eagles lost in Carrhae's bloody plain. 2 gates of steel, the name of Mars they bear, and still are worshipped with religious fear. Before his temple stand, the dire abode and the feared issues of the furious god are fenced with brazen bolts. Without the gates the wary guardian Janus doubly waits. Then, when the sacred senate votes the wars, the Roman consul their decree declares, and in his robes the sounding gates unbars. The youth in military shouts arise, and the loud trumpets break the yielding skies. These rites of old by sovereign princes used were the king's office, but the king refused, deaf to their cries, nor would the gates unbar of sacred peace, or loose the imprisoned war, but hid his head, and safe from loud alarms abhorred the wicked ministry of arms. Then heaven's imperious queen shot down from high, at her approach the brazen hinges fly, the gates are forced, and every falling bar, and like a tempest issues out the war. The peaceful cities of the Ausonian shore, lulled in their ease and undisturbed before, are all on fire, and some with studious care their restive steeds in sandy plains prepare. Some their soft limbs in painful marches try, and war is all their wish, and arms the general cry. Part scour the rusty shields with seam, and part new grind the blunted axe and point the dart. With joy they view the waving ensigns fly, and hear the trumpet's clangor pierce the sky. 5 cities forge their arms. The Athenian powers, and Temne, Tibur with her lofty towers, Ardea the proud, the Crustumerian town. All these of old were places of renown. Some hammer helmets for the fighting field, some twine young sallows to support the shield. The corslet some, and some the cuisses mold, with silver plated and with ductile gold. The rustic honors of the scythe and share give place to swords and plumes, the pride of war. Old falchions are new tempered in the fires, the sounding trumpet every soul inspires. The word is given, with eager speed they lace the shining headpiece, and the shield's embrace. The neighing steeds are to the chariot tied, the trusty weapon sits on every side. And now the mighty labor is begun. Ye muses, open all your helicon. Sing you the chiefs that swayed the Ausonian land, their arms and armies under their command. What warriors in our ancient clime were bred, what soldiers followed, and what heroes led. For well you know, and can record alone, what fame to future times conveys but darkly down. So Turnus is leading the charge in trying to convince Latinus to go to war. And he's proclaiming his private injuries, saying, I've been wronged. I should have had Lavinia, and I can't. And so he's adding to the chaos. The mothers who were going around in the mountains with Amata in their Bacchic frenzy, they are all shouting, and they are shouting for war, just like Amata's interest was. 806. We're told that the rout or crowd in 808 is all shouting for war, even though public sanctions of peace are against it. All omens of their success are ill, and their fates are averse. They don't care. They want to force King Latinus, the monarch, 809, to go to war. But Latinus is like a rock in the ocean. It stands tall, even though the rising waves are beating against it. It doesn't relent, and neither does he. The pious prince Latinus stands unmoved. But when he sees that Juno's power is prevailing, so it seems like either he recognizes that Juno is behind this, or he just knows that their force is too great, he consents to let them do what they want to do. However, it's not going to be my fault when this goes horribly. And Turnus, you will pay for this. You will pray for peace, but it's going to be too late. And so all I want now is to be left alone to die is pretty much his attitude at the end. And so we're told in 832 that he would not strive with this rising storm, but leaves the helm. He's the captain of the ship, and he's leaving his role as captain to just let the ship go where it's going to go. Probably could think about whether Latinus qualifies as a good leader. So we have this custom that we're told about now, that the Romans, anytime they're going to fight any of their foes, the gates of Mars are open. So this is actually at the Temple of Janus, and when they would go to war, their gates would be opened, and when they would come home victorious from war, they would close the gates. And so it's kind of a ceremony, and it gets passed down through the generations, and so the Romans still do it in Virgil's time. But the king is usually the one to start this, and the king, we're told, has nothing to do with this. He is not going to unbar those gates. He is not going to declare war. Lucky for the Rutulians, that's not a problem because Juno comes down and opens them anyway. And so all of these peaceful cities are now going to prepare for war. And we're told that the shields are being scoured with seam or grease, 868. They're grinding their blunted axe. They're making everything sharp. They are getting excited to fight. There's some sort of attractiveness in war for them. They love seeing the ensigns or the flags waving. They love hearing the trumpet cries. And all of these cities join in. They are all preparing their helmets and their weaponry, their cuisses, their thigh armor, the corselets, or here called crosslet, their breastplates. All of this is happening because everybody is in and the war will start. Virgil finishes off this section by saying, Muses, open all your helicon, your sacred mountain, to tell of everybody who was involved in this fight, who they were, where they came from, and what kind of soldiers followed them. And so the rest of Book 7 will be a recounting of the names of the leaders and who they led. Line 896. Mezentius first appeared upon the plain, scorn sate upon his brows, and sour disdain, defying earth and heaven. Etruria lost, he brings to Turnus aid his baffled host. The charming Lausus, full of youthful fire, rode in the rank, and next his sullen sire. To Turnus only second in the grace of manly mien and features of the face. A skilful horseman and a huntsman bred, with fates averse 1,000 men he led. His sire unworthy of so brave a son, himself well worthy of a happier throne. Next Aventinus drives his chariot round the Latian plains, with palms and laurels crowned. Proud of his steeds, he smokes along the field. His father's hydra fills his ample shield. 100 serpents hiss about the brims. The son of Hercules, he justly seems, by his broad shoulders and gigantic limbs. Of heavenly part, and part of earthly blood, a mortal woman mixing with a god. For strong Alcides, after he had slain the triple Gyrian, drove from the conquered Spain his captive herds, and thence in triumph led, on Tuscan Tiber's flowery banks they fed. Then on Mount Aventine the son of Jove the priestess Rhea found, and forced to love. For arms his men long piles and javelins bore, and poles with pointed steel their foes in battle gore. Like Hercules himself his son appears, in savage pomp, a lion's hide he wears. About his shoulders hangs the shaggy skin, the teeth and gaping jaws severely grin. Thus, like the god his father, homely dressed, he strides into the hall, a horrid guest. Then 2 twin brothers from fair Tiber came, which from their brother Tibers took the name. Fierce Coras and Catillus, void of fear, armed Argive horse they led, and in the front appear. Like cloud-born centaurs from the mountain's height, with rapid course descending to the fight, they rush along, the rattling woods give way, the branches bend before their sweepy sway. Nor was Praenesta's founder wanting there, whom fame reports the son of Mulciber. Found in the fire and fostered in the plains, a shepherd and a king at once he reigns, and leads to Turnus' aid his country swains. His own Praenesta sends a chosen band, with those who plough Saturnia's gaping land. Besides the succor which cold Onion yields, the rocks of Hernicus and dewy fields, Anagnia fat and Father Amacine, a numerous rout, but all of naked men, nor arms they wear, nor swords and bucklers wield, nor drive the chariot through the dusty fields, but whirl with leathern slings huge balls of lead, and spoils of yellow wolves adorn their head. The left foot naked when they march to fight, but in a bull's raw hide they sheathe the right. Messapus next, great Neptune was his sire, secure of steel and fated from the fire, in pomp appears, and with his ardor warms a heartless train, unexercised in arms. The just Faliscans he to battle brings, and those who live where Lake Cimenia springs, and where Feronia's grove and temple stands, who till Fuscinian or Flavinian lands. All these in order march, and marching sing the warlike actions of their sea-born king. Like a long team of snowy swans on high, which clap their wings and cleave the liquid sky, when homeward from their watery pastures borne, they sing, and Asia's lakes their notes return. Not one who heard their music from afar would think these troops an army trained to war, but flocks of fowl that, when the tempests roar, with their hoarse gabbling seek the silent shore. Then Colossus came, who led a numerous band of troops embodied from the Sabine land, and in himself alone an army brought. 'Twas he the noble Claudian race begot, the Claudian race ordained in times to come to share the greatness of imperial Rome. He led the Curies forth of old renown, Tuscans from their olive-bearing town, and all the Aretian powers, besides a band that followed from Velinum's dewy land, and Amiternian troops of mighty fame, and mountaineers that from Severus came, and from the craggy cliffs of Tetrica, and those where yellow Tiber takes his way, and where Himala's wanton waters play. Casperia sends her arms with those that lie by Faberus, and fruitful Foruli. The warlike aids of Horta next appear, and the cold Nursians come to close the rear, mixed with the natives born of Latin blood, whom Alia washes with her fatal flood. Not thicker billows beat the Libyan main, when pale Orion sets in wintry rain, nor thicker harvests on rich Hermus rise, or Lycian fields when Phoebus burns the skies. Then stand these troops, their bucklers ring around, their trampling turns the turf and shakes the solid ground. High in his chariot then Halesus came, a foe by birth to Troy's unhappy name, from Agamemnon born. To Turnus' aid 1,000 men the youthful hero led, who till the Massic soil, for wine renowned, and fierce Auruncans from their hilly ground, and those who live by Cytician shores, and where with shoaly fords Volturnus roars, Cales and Osca's old inhabitants, and rough Saticulans inured to once. Light demi-lances from afar they throw, fastened with leathern thongs to gall the foe. Short crooked swords in closer fight they wear, and on their warding arm light bucklers bear. Nor, Oibalus, shalt thou be left unsung, from nymph Semethus and old Telon sprung, who then in Teleboan Capri reigned. But that short isle the ambitious youth disdained, and o'er Campania stretched his ample sway, where swelling Sarnus seeks the Tyrrhene sea, or Batulum, and where Abella sees from her high towers the harvest of her trees. And these, as was the Teuton use of old, wield brazen swords and brazen bucklers hold, sling weighty stones when from afar they fight, their casques are cork, a covering thick and light. Next these in rank the warlike Ufens went, and led the mountain troops that Nursia sent. The rude Aquicolae his rule obeyed, hunting their sport and plundering was their trade. In arms they ploughed, to battle still prepared, their soil was barren, and their hearts were hard. Umbro the priest the proud Marubians led, by King Archippus sent to Turnus' aid, and peaceful olives crowned his hoary head. His wand and holy words the viper's rage and venom wounds of serpents could assuage. He, when he pleased with powerful juice to steep their temples, shut their eyes in pleasing sleep. But vain were Marcian herbs and magic art to cure the wound given by the Dardan dart. Yet his untimely fate the Angetian woods in sighs remurmured to the Fucine floods. All right, so like I said, lots and lots and lots of proper names here. Just to hit the highlights, we have in the first section Mezentius and his son Lausus, and they are the heroic leaders of the Etrurians. Next, we have Aventinus, who is the son of Hercules, and we have him compared quite a bit to Hercules. He wears a lion's hide, just like Hercules is famous for doing. Next, we have these twin brothers from fair Tiber, and they ride a lot of Argive horses. Next, we have Praenestus founder, who is the son of Mulciber, Vulcan. His name is not listed here, but his name is Cecilus, and he leads a group of people who don't have typical arms. They have yellow wolves on their heads. They have no shoe on their left foot, but a shoe of bull's rawhide on their right. And they, line 952, sling huge balls of lead. Next is Messapus, and he's great, but he leads a people who are unexercised in arms, 959. So they're not really fighters, but he leads them very well, being a son of Neptune, and they sing very well, Virgil tells us. Next is Clausus, and he leads the Sabine. He is the founder of the Claudian race, so any Claudius in Roman times is descended from him. And there are so many of these that the ground shakes, line 1000, when they are marching about. Next is Halesus, a son of Agamemnon. He leads a people that are near to once, meaning they are accustomed to lack, and they're kind of tough, right? They've seen a lot of winters, and they throw these short spears, and they have these short crooked swords. Next is Oibolus, and he leads some people who wield these brass swords, these brazen swords and bucklers, shields. They sling weighty stones. Their helmets or casques are cork. Next is Ufens, who rules this really tough people. Their hearts are hard, 1032. They love to hunt. And finally, in this section, Umbro, the priest, who has the power with his wand to control snakes, to make them inflamed with rage, or to heal somebody who's been bitten by one. And we are told that his fate will be untimely, which he's going to have a harsh death. So I wanted to point one thing out, and I won't be as in depth in the next section, I don't think, but notice how all of these leaders are royal, how they all have unique attributes, and how many of them descend from the gods. So Virgil's doing something intentional there. Finishing the book, starting in 1044. The son of famed Hippolytus was there, famed as his sire and as his mother fair, whom in Egerian groves Aricia bore, and nursed his youth along the marshy shore, where great Diana's peaceful altars flame, and fruitful fields, and Virbius was his name. Hippolytus, as old records have said, was by his stepdame sought to share her bed. But when no female arts his mind could move, she turned to furious hate her impious love. Torn by wild horses on the sandy shore, another's crime the unhappy hunter bore, glutting his father's eyes with guiltless gore. But chaste Diana, who his death deplored, with Aesculapian herbs his life restored. Then Jove, who saw from high with just disdain the dead inspired with vital breath again, struck to the centre with his flaming dart the unhappy founder of the godlike art. But Trivia kept in secret shades alone her care, Hippolytus, to fate unknown, and called him Virbius in the Egerian grove, where then he lived obscure but safe from Jove. For this from Trivia's temple and her wood are coursers driven, who shed their master's blood, affrighted by the monsters of the flood. His son, the second Virbius, yet retained his father's art, and warrior steeds he reined. Amid the troops, and like the leading god, high o'er the rest in arms, the graceful Turnus rode. A triple pile of plumes his crest adorned, on which, with belching flames, Chimera burns. The more the kindled combat rises higher, the more with fury burns the blazing fire. Fair Io graced his shields, But Io now with horns exalted stands, and seems to low a noble charge. Her keeper by her side, to watch her walks, his 100 eyes applied, and on the brims her sire, the watery god, rolled from a silver urn his crystal flood. A cloud of foot succeeds, and fills the fields with swords, and pointed spears, and clattering shields, of Argives, and of old Sicanian bands, and those who plough the rich Rutulian lands, Auruncan youth, and those Sicrana yields, and the proud Labicans with painted shields, and those who near Numician streams reside, and those whom Tiber's holy forests hide, or Circe's hills from the main land divide, where Ufens glides among the lowly lands, or the black water of Pomptina stands. Last from the Volscians fair Camilla came, and led her warlike troop a warrior dame. Unbred to spinning, in the loom unskilled, she chose the nobler Pallas of the field. Mixed with the first, the fierce virago fought, sustained the toils of arms, the danger sought, outstripped the winds in speed upon the plain, flew o'er the fields, nor hurt the bearded grain. She swept the seas, and as she skimmed along, her flying feet unbathed in billows hung. Men, boys, and women, stupid with surprise, where'er she passes, fix their wondering eyes. Longing they look, and gaping at the sight, devour her o'er and o'er with vast delight. Her purple habit sits with such a grace on her smooth shoulders, and so suits her face. Her head with ringlets of her hair is crowned, and in a golden caul the curls are bound. She shakes her myrtle javelin, and behind her Lycian quiver dances in the wind. Alright, so Book 7 finishes with the recounting of 3 leaders and their appearance and who they're leading. So we start with Hippolytus' son Virbius, and we get the backstory of Hippolytus. If you're familiar with Greek myth, then you might know the story. Hippolytus hates marriage and worships Artemis, or in Roman terms, Diana. And he shuns the worship of Venus. Well, Venus is not happy about this, and so Venus causes Hippolytus' stepmom to fall in love with him. And when that happens, his stepmom will not leave him alone and keep seeking to be with him, to have a relationship with him, and he keeps rejecting it. Well, his stepmom is not happy, and so wildly accuses him of forcing himself on her. This Hippolytus' father is not happy about, so he has Hippolytus dragged behind horses on the beach. So we see that part on line 1054, torn by wild horses. And so chaste Diana, Artemis, looks down and hates what she sees, and so goes to Asclepius, who ends up being a god of medicine. And Asclepius is able to bring him back from the dead. Jove is not happy about this, so Jove kills Asclepius before he spreads his art to everybody, and all these humans have immortality as a result. Well, then Artemis, trivia, Diana, is not happy about what happened to Hippolytus, and so refuses to let him die, and keeps him secretly in the Egerian grove, and lives a life obscure, so isn't famous, nobody knows he's there, but he's safe. And so he's not married, but he doesn't want to be, and he is with the virgin goddess, and so everybody's kind of happy. But as a result, this is where horses that kill their masters are sent to Artemis' temple. And so we're told at the end that Virbius, the son of Hippolytus, very much retained the same art, and he has these fierce horses that he's leading. Second to last, Turnus is described. The plumes of his helmet are said to be like Chimera's flames, and when the battle is fierce, the flames grow hotter and higher. And on his shield is Io, the lover of Jove, and she's been turned into a cow, and she's being watched by Argus Panoptes, who has the 100 eyes. And so that's the central scene on his shield. And then her river god father, Inachus, is on the outside of his shield. And it's a beautiful shield, and Turnus is leading all of these groups of people, the Argives, the Sicanians, Rutulians, Auruncans, Socranians, Labicans, and Numetians, along with those from farther away, like who live inside of Tiber's forests or live beyond Circe's hills. The last one is a warrior woman of Arago, and her name is Camilla. So she's not quite an Amazonian warrior, but she essentially is, and she leads all of these men into battle. So she's not used to spinning, she doesn't work the loom, she chose to be a warrior, to choose the nobler Pallas, Athena, of the field. So she can fight, 11:10. She's faster than the wind, 11:11. And she is beautiful, so that when people see her pass, they can't stop looking. They devour her oar and oar with their eyes. And she's wearing purple, so a very royal color. And she is leading this last group. She shakes a myrtle javelin, and the Lycian's quiver dances in the wind. So those are her primary weapons. So this is going to be the group of people. We're going to meet several of them again, and they'll pop up, and we'll know that they are these glorious leaders, and we'll see what happens to them as the book continues. That is the end of Book 7.